Hi, my name is Sarah Shepard. I want to welcome you to this Kinky Venus sequence. You can't title a program Kinky Venus sequence, in my opinion, without offering a little bit more information about what Kinky Venus sequence is. And so I'm going to go through a little bit of an introduction of who I am and what brought me to this work and help you understand how this mentorship goes so that you can um, provide yourself with some deeper nourishment in your own body and what's possible with this Venus sequence work. So my background is for about 20 years, 20 plus years, was a embodiment facilitator or practitioner in one degree or another. I went originally to school to be a registered massage therapist. That led me down the um, pathway of myofascial work primarily and working with people in understanding where they had fascial inhibitions. Any areas of stuck fascia have a tendency to have emotions stored in them, and the emotional releases tend to be quite wild. And so, as I had 20 years of training of anatomy and physiology and therapeutic technique for working with the body and the organs and the different systems and the fluid bodies, I didn't feel prepared for working with people in the emotional realms, the energetic realms. It really wasn't covered to the degree that I felt like it was needed in the teaching that I had done, and in particular the soul realm, because I don't come from a, a childhood where I was exposed to or steeped in organized religion. My lineage is of ministry. And so on my dad's side of the family, there's a lot of ministerial vocations. But it never occurred to me that that was something that I would have gifting and working in, although it seems quite obvious in hindsight. Growing up with the farm and animals and spending time in nature in a First Nations town in a little area called Lillooet, British Columbia, which was a great place to be from, is what I always say. But it didn't give me the tools that I needed for understanding how to support people in what they discovered as they were going through their own healing journey related to stuck areas of trauma, stored areas of physical repression and pain that was in their body. But I did learn how to start to incorporate and weave those together through a series of retreats and embodiment classes and working with people in their viscera and discovering my gene keys, discovering that I have 8 6 lines. I'm a 6/2 projector. I have this really unique way of guiding and working with people that allows me to bring it into your body more so probably than anybody else you'll work with, simply because that's my first language. My first language is to support people in the energetics of their body, and then the soul work and understanding how to help people with their soul work. The thing I'm so grateful to Richard Rudd on the path of working with the path of frequency around our gene keys is that I get to help people understand how their frequencies are working in their body. And instead of psychologizing it or saying, this is a pattern that has to do with your relational attachment and there's some of these aspects that may all very well be true. Um, what do I do with it? How do I move differently in relationship to it? That's what I've always been drawn to. And that's what I work with my clients as a guide is to help them understand how to come to a place of energetic mastery. So I teach and mentor the Venus sequence in 3 phases. I break down the pathway so that the earth and so the first sphere, your body, is all about learning your containment. It's all about learning about alchemy. You'll see lots of alchemy talks that I've done related to transforming denser energies into gold, into this free energy that is for many the experience of love and freedom and connectivity. When we learn our containment, when we learn to be self-responsible, when we learn that our inner journey is our own inner journey and everybody else has their own inner journey, everything starts to change. And in particular, what I've brought into Kinky Venus Sequence is a bunch of play shops that are designed to help you feel the energy of self, to help you feel Eros or the charges of what I call a yin arousal. So a slow building vital force energy that is a part of my everyday, that is a part of my connection to my divine being that's in here, simply by practicing these teachings that are connecting us back into this inner union, this space that we will get to at the end of the Venus sequence, but we actually need to take it with us all the way along. So phase one is developing your containment, developing your capacity around containment, developing your relationship to become aware of your patterns of projection, to become aware of the way that you move in relationship to other by first coming into your own heart husbandry is what I call it. So it has a lot to do with developing your yang, your masculine ability to see, to discern, to call it home, to stay in your lane, and to get greater and greater comprehension around personal presence, personal energy, personal sovereignty. This word that I didn't understand for such a long period of time means that you can have needs. These needs can be advocated for from a profoundly empowered place when we allow ourselves to recognize what layer of our journey that we're moving from. So phase one is moving into sovereignty, moving into solid ground, moving into your own personal experience. And in phase one, we introduce this technique called authentic relating. So there'll be a workshop for guidance and understanding your gene key, and then a play shop for authentic relating. And authentic relating is one of the most so I didn't grow up with a family that was really great at communication. Um, it's one thing to say that every relationship moves from harmony to disharmony to repair, but I didn't understand that. So this is one of the teachings I like to help people with is that if you grew up in a dynamic where you thought that every relationship only moved from harmony to disharmony and then you needed to get it back to harmony again, you don't recognize that there's a third phase in there, and that phase is called repair. And without having a repair landscape or without having an understanding of that imprint of how do I have pain in my body or have wounding or have this experience and not make it somebody else's responsibility. When I take ownership for it, when I work with my own neural network of my survival biology, because that's really what it is we become competent in working with our survival biology and wanting to move towards connection. And when I do that, I need skills for this. So, authentic relating, there's 5 workshops within this mentorship that are for helping you learn how to create honesty, moving from a space of speaking to your actual experience, what your body is wanting to bring into the conversation, letting yourself be seen as you are in a group setting or an individual setting, and the places where we project or have these habits of needing to save somebody or needing somebody to save us. These unconscious dynamics of the shadows, the way they play out, they need somewhere else to go. And contemplation has been this great tool for me to catch where the energies are moving. Are they moving toward avoidance? And are they following like an overly yin? Because of my because of my energetic competency, I can tell if it's moving in an avoidant pattern, a yin pattern, or if it's moving in a yang pattern, a projective pattern, a blaming pattern, a reactive pattern. Then I can find this sweet spot in between. And for me, this authentic relating toolkit and the ways of speaking in this teaching that we're going to provide 5 workshops within this mentorship for gave me the skill set to get closer to myself and get closer to another and to decondition some of these patterns that I had in my nervous system, which were adaptive strategies that I had developed because of just vulnerability wasn't actually safe for me a lot of the time. So safe vulnerability is another big section that is a part of this mentorship. One of the most profound tools I feel like I've ever really moved through in transformation is recognizing that I could build a lot of confidence in my connection with other people and my communication with other people when I became a safe person for them to relate to and be open and honest with. And in phase one, we move from this contained, sovereign, grounded, present individual into the astral realm where the moon governs our experience. And the astral realm is so magical. This is a place where we really start to recognize that we're so much greater than this individual having this life that we're having. But in the initial phases of it, it can be really like an energetic chaos, is what the experience can be, where there's this, emotions have a life. Emotions have a consciousness. When we don't realize who we are relative to the emotional realm, it can be really confusing, and a lot of merging and conflating experiences happen where we're suffering and struggling trying to find who we are relative to what's going on. So, astral plane or astral realm legibility and understanding who you are relative to these other aspects, the attractor field and like the workshops and play shops around the attractor field were life changing for me to be able to understand that I have a theme and that other people have a theme and that we can understand these themes through knowing our keynotes. But then what do we do with them in relationship and how do we do that in a playful way? And this is where kink made all of the difference for me. Because shadows prior to understanding kink, and kink is probably best described as just like whatever you think is outside of the realm of love, wherever your energy bumps into a bend in the hose of energy, this Sushumna Nadi that we have, the central channel of our body, it has kinks in it. And when those kinks happen, they're usually a somatic wound that's tied up in there. And we'll eroticize that wound without recognizing it, not realizing that we've got, behind that wound slate a tremendous amount of love and openness and deep intimate experiences. So when I started doing shadow work, I got so confused around this, and I did go into a lot of sort of victimy patterns. And so now the way that I work with this is this process of the containment and the heart husbandry, like I was saying, but then moving in a playful way. So these other workshops that are a part of this mentorship, there's 6 of them that are kinky play shops, and each one of them goes with the sphere that it is in for that month. So if we're working with the earth, it's a kinky play shop about understanding sensations in your body and the shadows that are connected to those sensations in your body. In the sphere of the attractor field and working with the moon, these are our desires, our desire nature, the way we fantasize or dream about love in the world, the way we are connected to the sexual wound that we got at conception and then are recapitulating in our relationships. And so, without looking at this energetics of the sexual wound and of the erotic charges of energy and the power to rewrite that story when we're our own container, when we have safety in our advocacy, when we understand what it is that is ours and how we're working with it, this becomes this pen to go and redo the script on your own authority around love. And the power of it, the magnetism of it is from the attractor field. So that's all in phase one. This is month 1 and month 2. So the pattern within each of the months goes, there's a guidance session with Sarah. There's a week before we have an authentic relating play shop that helps you practice these techniques in the group. And then we have a 3rd week where it's a kinky play shop. And then we have a week off for homework. So every month it's the same, on for 3, off for 1. And it's a month to month theme where each month we're working with a sphere. Phase 1 is Earth and the attractor field. Phase 2 is really the beginning. Anybody who's already done the Venus sequence knows this. This is where we get to meet Venus. This is where Venus and Mars are the archetypes that we're working with and playing with, but it's also the conscious side of relating. This is the space where Sarah has her journey and she is weaving it with somebody else. This place that Richard talks about as the Eden loop between the patterns that we can have in relationship and the way that they can show up, and the way that if we had better languaging and if we had more capacity around reading our own inner landscape, that leads to a greater intimacy with each person. And so again, we have this play shop this authentic relating and this guidance series that happen for the sphere in phase 2 of Venus. And then we bring that into Mars. And Venus and Mars, as you know, if you've done this work before, have, this is the way that when the wound moves, because everybody's wound map, of course, the wound within it gets moved. If we're a safe place for ourselves, and then we start to recognize the flavors and the features of the astral realm energies, when we get to Venus, we start to see all of the places that we perform in order to attain connection, or whatever masks we've maybe put on around our story. And getting really good at alchemy at this point is something that is the sweetest way to journey with these energies. This conscious relating time, there's quite a bit. There's 3 workshops that are authentic relating within this. And we even go into places where in your homework, you can be exploring what it means to relook at your desires, the way that you had your first erotic experience, the way that you first fell in love, the stories that you created around that, and how they're still playing out. And then through the group and through the ability to do this in this authentic relating way, you start to get to rewrite some of those elements of how does that charge of energy show up for me so that I am aware of when I'm defending myself, when I'm aware of when I've got a forward facing story or a mask that believes that it needs to keep me safe. They're all benevolent forces. They are all, really collaborative with us when we get kinky and playful with them, in my experience. So these different layers are what we're working on in phase 2, as well as this really unique thing that happens when you start to come to your emotional guidance system and you start to understand that this is just parts that need to be digested. So when they show up, there's several processes that I support everybody with that have to do with really allowing the emotions to speak to us as an intelligence. These molecules, like I was saying, they get stuck in the body and then they magnetize other people, other experiences, outer world energies to us to help us unwind them. And when we realize that we get to be in a relationship with unwinding those emotional energies and that they don't need to be healed. They simply need to be provided a space for their intelligence to be brought forward. They tend to flow and move. So this might be, depending on where you're at in your journey, this might be anything from EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique processes where you're working on that at home, to speaking from the desire body and speaking from the space of what it is that is your warrior of love. What are you fighting for in love? Sometimes this process comes up in my practice of coaching women where they forget that they're fighting for love, and we've become so guarded and so armored in our heart that we can't feel the world anymore because we don't trust what our heart is saying, because there's so much wounding there. And the way that we can be playful with this and come back to this place of this, de-armoring the heart has to do with understanding, what am I fighting for? What matters for me? What am I moving towards? That martial energy that comes out through deeply coming to a comprehension of our Mars in our conscious side, or what we know as the EQ. So back to the play, back to phase 3 is we're returning back to this place of our birth. We're returning back to I really enjoy teaching in this space of the sounds and the shapes that your emotions make. We in our play shops here are making our mind take a back seat to the anguish that wants to move through and just to be made into a sound, or the mewing or the sweetness that is still wrapped around our heart and throat and wants to make a sound and come from that connection. When we make space for energy to move as a somatic shape, as a pre-verbal innocence, healing is this remarkable thing that is like a side effect of it. We just have this liberated playfulness that comes out. And one of the things that I've found to be such a delight in being a parent of an autistic son is there's lots of times where speaking without communicating words is so helpful for our connection. Instead of me going into the mind and explaining and trying to help through languaging, simply by body language, by gestures, by sounds, by weaving our energies together consciously in co-regulation, we really get to start to see this innocence that each of us have. And as any parent knows, as you journey back into this, there's a lot of tenderness that can come up for all of the times that we weren't met. People that are newer to the Venus sequence, this work around the first 7-year cycle of your life, as well as your conception and how you were met in your body by your parents, whether they physically loved and attuned to you or not, can be such a tender space to go back to. And so many people never do. Many people come to me because they haven't felt safe to go back into their body. And so they have pain in their pelvis, or they have pain in their low back, or they have pain or, issues with fertility, or elements of sort of that part of their body that is still tied up in these old patterns. And when we start to allow for them and get into making spaces for shapes and sounds and the innocence of our play, then there's this incredible thing that happens. And I really have found that, working on, like I mentioned, I have all of these 6 lines. And so one of the things that shows up for me is this, like, where is this going? How are we going to do this on this collective scale? And in what way are we going to be able to really meet all of the needs of humanity over a long span of time? And what I have found is this process of working with play, it develops trust. It develops trust in yourself. It develops trust in your heart. It develops your own capacity to understand where you have given away your freedom, where you're denying yourself your freedom, where you have a relationship of moving away from joy or shutting yourself down from joy because of shame. Part of this third line core wound that shows up, or I like to call it the core medicine. The incredible capacity of the fourth line to shut a person down or open them up in such a world-changing, heart-open way. The incredible forgiveness that occurs when people start to recognize that there can be freedom in their relationships, and they can love the way they want to love, and they can move the way that they want to move, and that they can be a safe space for others as well as themselves. And that the imprint that they were given around relationship is something that they can go and rewrite. We can go and rewrite our relationship to love and connection by doing this work. And that leads to this, wild experience of moving into harmony. So what I just listed off there, I was glancing down at my notes to make sure that I did them in the right order: trust, freedom, joy, gentleness, forgiveness, and harmony. This is what happens when we do our core medicine work. This is what happens when we travel all the way back into this pre-verbal time, these imprints that we have from before we were born. It's in our body. It's not in our story. It's in our nervous system. It's not in the way that we see or speak about another person. It's how we deeply feel safe or not safe. And so that is an incredible labor of love to bring to the world, to become a safe space for people in relationship, to become a safe space for yourself and transformation, and then to be an emissary of what's possible as we do this core medicine work. And I am really blessed to be able to host and work with the team on this Venus sequence. And I wanted to put something together that was a mentorship that wove all of the layers of my background. So weaving, the word for the weave that I speak about all the time, is Tantra. And Tantra, it's not simply this sexual thing. A lot of people think it's sexual practices or positions, and certainly there's a section of that within it. Not something that we're covering, but what I am covering is this Your nervous system isn't meant to be regulated out of your transformational journey. It's so that you recognize that you have this capacity. Tantra allows you to open your capacity for love when you can feel the anguish and feel the pain, but also feel safe. When you can move through things that you haven't been able to move through because it wasn't safe to do so, and therefore the wisdom was to not. And you can start to change that for yourself and for others. This is how we will transform the world. This is how we will alter the frequency of humanity. And that's something I'm very much interested in participating in. So if this calls to you, reach out. There's within the page um, prices for the different tiers and how it works, as well as detail of the first, second, and third phases that I just went through. Mostly, I love the Gene Keys community and I love being a part of supporting people in this work. So you might just find that you want to do an individual reading with me and some individual mentorship. But either way, I'm glad you found me. I'm happy you're here and I look forward to this journey together. Thanks for listening.